Leafs fam, what is up? This is the Leafs Convo. I am Norman James. So glad to have you aboard. Whether you're listening on iTunes, Anchor, or through our YouTube channel, we appreciate it very much. Make sure you subscribe to all three so that you are kept apprised and up to date on everything we do going forward, and we have so much planned. For this podcast, we're going to talk about the Marlies in Texas. Can Toronto put this series away and win their first Calder Cup while in Texas, or do we want them to make it to Game 6 and win it in front of 8,000 plus fans at Ricoh Coliseum? The Marlies up 2-1 on the Stars. Mike and I will dissect what is going on. Plus, Auston Matthews and his agent have moved to the Orr Hockey Group. How does that move affect how much the Leafs are going to have to pay AM34 and when? Plus, Lou Lamoriello down on the island. Now general manager, he just does what he wants, right? But are we going to let him take any of our top coaches from the Toronto organization? Sheldon Keefe, hands off, Lou. DJ Smith, well, that might be a little bit dicier. Plus, we get into Mike's Mailbag, the maiden voyage of a segment we know you're going to love so much. I'm ready to pod. Mike's ready to pod. You're ready to pod. So what do you say, folks? Let's kill it. The Leafs Combo starts now. And here is the straw that stirs our collective drink, the one and only Mike Augello. Hello, sir.
Good morning, Norman. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Just had a great conversation with my wife. She's like, who's into hockey right now? You're just so focused on this podcast. You need to do more housework. And I'm like, well, everybody's into hockey right now. Everyone's into the Leafs Combo. And she's like, oh, I know. Okay. Good luck to you. So here I am with you. Couch I could sleep on at some point. I'll take a bus down to Buffalo, Cheektowaga.
I could make arrangements, but I was funny. I was just exchanging messages with a friend, and I said, you think that the Stanley Cup is almost over with, and that the hockey season is over with, and I'm like, no. The next month is going to be like a key moment for 31 teams because decisions are going to be made on contracts and trades and the draft. It's more important than ever, and it's going to be very, very busy. And I'm sure we'll have lots of Leaf combos in the next month or so.
You better believe it, Mike. This is the Leafs Combo. Norman James along with Mike Augello. We're just trying to build something special here. We certainly want to have a lot of momentum as the 18-19 season begins because now that I'm full-time into this, Mike, I'm putting a lot of attention and care into the dream that is the Leafs Combo, and one that we were dabbling in over now. It's something that we can really sink our teeth into, and I see big things for this podcast and everybody who's involved with it. So the Marlies Stars Game 4 down in Texas tonight. Toronto up 2-1 in this Calder Cup finale. It's interesting, after the shit show opener, that 6-5 crazy game that got things underway, that wasn't necessarily representative of how either team had performed in the Calder Cup playoffs. We've seen the last two games of this Calder Cup championship series get back to a little bit of a tighter structured hockey, but the Marlies are still up 2-1 after losing 2-1 in Game 2 and winning 2-1 in Game 3. So what should we expect from Game 4 Marlies Stars tonight?
I'd be shocked if it isn't more of the same from Game 2 and Game 3. I mean, it's similar to the Syracuse series where the first game was sort of wild and high scoring, and then it settled in, at least for the Game 2 was, I think, a double overtime game, and then the Marlies went to Syracuse and kicked their butt twice. But in this, Texas is a very sound two-way team. They're going to play close to the vest. It's going to be low scoring. If it isn't low scoring, then either Garrett Sparks or Mike McKenna will have had a bad game. But I would foresee that this series is going to be pretty tight and pretty close, just like Game 3 was. And that's a game that the Marlies feel comfortable playing. But for people who are watching it who have rooting interest, I think they would want a little more of a gap between them and their opposition.
Do you think, and I know you weren't predicting this, you felt a few podcasts ago that Texas and Toronto would come back to Ricoh for a potential clincher either way. Do you still feel that? Do you still feel like this could be a series that does go the full 7, or is there a situation tonight where if the Marlies can not only get past the stars on the score sheet, but psychologically maybe tear them down a little bit or deflate their spirits? That, I mean, this could be a situation where we see the Marlies clinching in Texas.
It's possible. I mean, I think I predicted the Marlies in 6, although I don't think I made it public. But I mean, yes, similar to the Syracuse series. They went into Syracuse, scored, I think, 1:01 into the first period, and I think they scored 7 goals in that game. If something like that happens in Texas, where it's just a curb stomping, then it's going to be tough for Texas to sort of get up to win Game 5 and then go to Toronto to try to win Game 6 and 7. Not that it's impossible, but I expected, since Texas is a good veteran AHL team, that they're going to win at least one of the games in Texas and force a Game 6. Now, if the Marlies are down 3-2 or up 3-2, or if they eliminate them, I mean, I don't know, but I feel safe in saying that the series will come back to Rico next Tuesday. But anything is possible with this team.
This is the Leafs Convo. Norman James in London, Ontario. Mike Augello in Buffalo, New York. If you're listening to us through the Hockey Buzz article, sunk your mind and your spirits into the great Mike Augello composing something, and you're using the embedded player through that platform, do us a favor. Keep coming back, and by coming back often, perhaps subscribing to the podcast might actually benefit you, because we do provide not only podcasts throughout the week, but updates as to what we're doing and special things along the way. And we'd really appreciate that. We are certainly in the formative stages of the Leafs Convo reboot, and we need all the support we can get, because at the end of the day, we are going to provide you with plenty of Leafs content going forward. Now, Sheldon Keefe, one of the top young coaching minds in all of hockey, and he has his Marlies 2 wins away from winning their first Calder Cup. You wonder how long a guy like Sheldon Keefe can be hidden in the AHL before someone decides to pluck him from that league and bring him up to the big show. And you'd think that if someone was going to do it, it might be an individual who knows about Sheldon Keefe and has spent time with him and now works for another organization, Lou Lamoriello. Are you prepared in some way, Mike, to perhaps say goodbye to Sheldon Keefe following what could be a Calder Cup championship for his Toronto Marlies, considering he's got to be a hot commodity for those looking for young talent at the NHL level?
I think eventually we'll be saying goodbye to Sheldon Keefe, but I don't think it's going to be this summer, simply because he doesn't have any NHL experience, very limited as a player, less than 100 games, and nothing as even an NHL assistant. So I actually think, and regarding the Islanders, there's been a lot of chatter that the guy who the Leafs may lose in terms of someone on their coaching staff might be former Islander draft pick DJ Smith, who's an assistant to Babcock. And in a poll in March from the NHLPA, he was the assistant coach in the league that a lot of people, the highest percentage that thought would be a good NHL head coach. So I wouldn't be surprised if DJ Smith is the guy who goes to New York. I mean,
to do what?
To be the head coach of the Islanders.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
Now there's a lot of talk, and it won't be settled until after the Cup final. There's some talk about Barry Trotz not going back to Washington. Being, if they win, just being a sort of a one and done. Talk about him possibly going to Minnesota to replace Bruce Boudreau, because Paul Fenton is the general manager there, and the ownership is Craig Leopold, who used to own the Predators. So there could be a domino effect, and there might be an opening in Washington. There might be and there definitely is an opening with the firing of Garth Snow and Doug Waite. So there has been some chatter about DJ Smith, but back to Keefe, I think his next move, if he wins a Calder Cup, unless the Leaf organization are bound and determined for him to stay in the AHL to be the developmental coach, I think the next move, if DJ Smith moves on, that Keefe would come up as an assistant to Babcock. And that, that's the stepping stone to an NHL head coaching job, because we can see from the tree that emanates from Babcock, from Bill Peters to Paul McLean to Todd McClellan to the Detroit coach, who I'm drawing a blank on right now. All of them served as assistants under Babcock. So I think that's the next move for Sheldon Keefe.
You mean a coach being coached still means something in this day and age, Mike? I thought these young superstar geniuses were ready to step onto the big stage without much rearing, if you know what I mean.
I do, but I think when it comes to coaching, if it's not somebody like Rod Brindamore who had, 1,000 NHL games, or someone who had been a coach in college for a number of years, the NHL teams, general manager, want coaches that have some experience at the NHL level, either as an assistant or as a head coach. And that's why I think, Sheldon Keefe, the best thing for him would be to move up to be an assistant with Babcock. There's no guarantee that that's the case. There might be an opportunity for him to get a job somewhere in the next year or two, but I think that might be the move for him.
Because Sheldon Keefe is tied into Kyle Dubas, there's a massive faction out there that is just pro Sheldon Keefe, even over Mike Babcock. I haven't heard much talk from the fan base, or a particular section of the fan base with a philosophy that's still shifting to laud or praise or get behind DJ Smith very much, because he serves on a staff with Mike Babcock. And I'm hoping over the next several months, and maybe we can do this through this podcast, just try to get a bit more of a cohesive unit back together again among the fan base, not to have these factions or these rivalries happening internally. Another thing too, Mike, is I hope that the Sheldon Keefe situation, whether he stays with the Marlies another season, whether he comes up and serves under Mike Babcock, doesn't turn into this free Sheldon Keefe a la free Dallas Eakins scenario that we had several seasons ago. Remember Dallas Eakins was the chosen one, and he was being oppressed by Leafs management in order to placate. Was it Wilson or was it Carlisle in those days? I forget, but it was all Dallas Eakins. He was the genius. He was the guy who had to come up. He knew how to manage the players that were at the NHL level, and the current, and that coach in that situation did not. Well, we've seen how things worked out for Dallas Eakins, right? And I'm not saying that he's not deserving of another chance, or that he did not have the skill or the know-how to work in the NHL and to deal with players, but his opportunity kind of fell flat, right, with the Oilers, right? So make a comment on that. We have to keep.
Yeah, no, I mean, and Dallas Eakins is going to get another NHL shot. He just got extended by Anaheim to be the San Diego Gulls head coach, and more than likely, when Randy Carlyle either retires or they need to move on from him, he's probably going to be their answer. But I mean, the whole difference here is it's Babcock, it's not Randy Carlyle. I mean, Randy Carlyle's a Stanley Cup winner, and in my mind, a very good head coach, and I know that he took a lot of arrows from Leaf fans, and there is a faction, probably the analytics or the younger generation, as you say, that is sort of anti-Babcock or anti the way it's all or nothing in his mind or in his administration. But he's here. He's making $6.5 million. He's under contract for another 4 years. So get used to it, folks. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Well, much of the analytics faction was anti-Mark Hunter. And Mark Hunter's the forefather of analytics. All speed, all skill. Right? And his accomplishments are absolutely ridiculous. So this doesn't necessarily come down to just being, pro analytics versus anti-analytics. This is pro youth versus
it's generational. It's generational.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for us, like our demographic for the Leafs Convo spans fans in their late teens to fans in their early 60s. And I like that because I'm all for youth, but I'm also for having respect for the forefathers, for those who've come before us. And I want to learn from people who have more knowledge than me. And I want to pass along knowledge that I have to those who are interested in absorbing more knowledge from someone like myself. And so this, I'm kind of caught in the middle of this generational, this age war. And, maybe part of what we can do here with the Leafs Convo is not exacerbate it, but maybe quash it or smooth it out a little bit. And, that's something that we'll have to remind ourselves to do as time goes on. Don't forget Mike's Mailbag, the debut coming up in moments. We're not going to go too long today. We have another podcast with Gus Katsaros coming up, and then plenty of good things on the Leafs Convo in the days, weeks, and months ahead. The news that was big yesterday, and I'm still lingering a little bit, Auston Matthews' agent Judd Moldaver joining Orr Hockey Group, leaving CAA Group. So Matthews goes with Moldaver to Orr, and there was just a lot of reckless speculation over whether, now that Matthews and his agent are with Orr, there might be an aggressive negotiation or expectation to generate that big contract for Matthews, because he's working under Orr, and it's the Orr Hockey Group representing Connor McDavid, who orchestrated the 8-year, $100 million contract for Mr. McD. I'm kind of looking at it like, well, now we're potentially in a scenario where you're going to have all the Matthews fans who are typically pro Dubas in a situation where they're going to have to pick one side or the other, because it's Dubas now representing the organization, not a generation, right? And it's Dubas who's going to have to come back with a contract offer to Auston Matthews that might not be to his liking and might not be to the pro Matthews factions liking. You know what I'm saying, Mike?
Yeah, it's sort of a story that we don't know where it's going. We don't know how to interpret it. I mean, not only me, but like people at the top of the business, like Elliot Friedman or Bob McKenzie. They know that Moldaver moved from CAA and Pat Brisson's group to the Orr Wasserman group, and that Matthews tagged along. He's been represented by Moldaver for a long time, so he trusts him, and that's understandable. Whether how to interpret it in terms of the future, I mean, the only thing I can say is that McDavid signed the extension on his deal after the second year of his entry level deal. So he didn't wait until the end. He didn't become an RFA. It didn't become the speculation of the offer sheet potential, which, I mean, if somebody offer sheeted Auston Matthews, it'd be matched in 3 seconds. So it's not, people know that it's not going to happen, and because it doesn't happen in the NHL anymore. But what I think this portends is the possibility of them getting this deal done this summer. Now, I spoke to a reporter at the Marlies game, a few days ago, and he was basically saying, why would Matthews sign? Why not play out the third year? Why not, put up big numbers like you've done the first 2 years, and then hold the Leafs' feet to the fire and say, okay, now pay me $14 million a year? And that's like, that's possible. But the problem is that if he has another year where he misses 20 games due to injury and his numbers are down, then he hurts his value. So I think that, this is going to get done this summer. I think they're going to try to get him done. But the one cautionary tale is McDavid signed his contract, I think, early July for $12.5 million. And then Edmonton had a problem with Draisaitl and gave Draisaitl way more than they thought they would have to give him. And Mitch Marner led this team in scoring. So what is Mitch Marner going to want? I think they're going to try to get Marner done first, and then Matthews after. So I think they're going to try to get them done both in early July, and that'll be the work of Lawrence Gilman and Brandon Pridham to get that done.
We're all expecting the team to be peachy keen and hunky-dory and everyone wanting to work together with the number one ambition of winning a Stanley Cup. But agents and organizations at times do work in tandem, but on many occasions they certainly do not. And Auston Matthews earning all the money in the world and taking up a large part of a salary cap allotment is obviously going to put the Maple Leafs in a situation where they're going to have to make some tough decisions, and it could affect the types of players that are brought in or kept to support a guy like Auston Matthews, who many expect will become the captain and the leader of this organization for, I don't know, a decade. Who knows? We'll see what happens. However, he's going to have to be careful in his salary demands, and Kyle Dubas is going to have to be careful in the amount of money he's willing to part with for Matthews in order to make sure that this train stays on the tracks, and it's going to make for some interesting times ahead. And again, I don't want to I don't want to undersell
the potential rift that could arise, maybe not this summer, but in summers ahead and in years to come, between the Matthews camp and the Maple Leafs, headed by Kyle Dubas, because, I mean, one is representing an organization that has the bigger picture in mind, and one will be representing himself. And I don't want to paint Auston Matthews out to be some guy who's greedy or petulant or bratty, but you know, when the agents get involved and there are other deals that have been inked that you would look at and say, well, this could be a precursor to what we're going to be asking for, or this is an example of the kind of money that we're expecting based on the numbers. Anything's possible. But again, I've made this point over and over and over on this podcast. All I want is this team to win a championship, and I'm starting to get loud about it, Mike. I know people love their players and they're starstruck, and they've been motivated by or influenced by certain players or hockey people. That's all fine and dandy. For me, though, I want this team to be collectively together to win a Stanley Cup. Before I kick the bucket, Mike, we've got to keep going here. Just a quick comment on Game 5 Stanley Cup. Come on, man. The Capitals have to finish this thing off.
Well, I think that if Vegas is going to get back into the series, I mean, obviously they're down 3-1, and their backs are against the wall. I know William Karlsson missed practice yesterday, but he's supposedly going to play tonight. I think Vegas has got something left, in the sense that I think they can win at home and force a Game 6 and then put the onus back on the Capitals. And again, the Capitals have not given many people reason to doubt them in this series. They've been dominant since that Game 1, since the third period of Game 1. They've been the better of the two teams. I just continue to say, and I'll probably say this when they're skating around the ice with the Stanley Cup. I don't get how Washington is winning in the playoffs. I don't think they're that good of a team, but they're, Ovechkin's playing well, and Holtby is playing great in goal, and maybe, it's Cinderella and it's 12:01 and the carriage has turned into a pumpkin. But I think the pumpkin can still win a game. So I'm going to go with Vegas in Game 5.
I like when the results go against the grain and everything isn't so simply forecast. I believe this is what makes it fun, and I also believe it's the kind of storyline that the Maple Leafs can be at the forefront of in the seasons to come. Mike, you ready for Mike's mailbag?
I am.
Let's take a quick one.
The Leafs Convo started with Mike and Norm just a few years ago, but it's you who will take this podcast into the future thanks to your amazing support. We'd like to offer special recognition to Dr. Faisal Rahman of London, Ontario, for his dedication, commitment, and contribution to this podcast. Dr. Rahman has been a major backer of sports projects, ideas, and innovations throughout London and beyond. His involvement in helping the growth of the Leafs Convo is not only appreciated, but a true honor. Thank you, Dr. Faisal Rahman.
And we are back for our final segment, Mike's Mailbag. This is the maiden voyage of this attempt at answering your questions. Mike's the expert. You are very inquisitive, so let's have at it. You ready, Mike?
I am ready.
Our first question from @GaryGambin. The Leafs potentially need third and fourth line centers for next season. Let's assume they don't land JT and don't bring Bozak back. What realistic options are out there via trade or free agency that would be better than what they can promote from the Marlies?
Well, I think the fourth line center is going to be internal. I mean, they signed Power Lindholm out of the Swedish league. They have Miro Aaltonen, who scored 20 goals with the Marlies, and Freddie Gauthier. So I think that they're going to try and solve the fourth line center position with what was already on hand. And I would say right now the leading candidate would be Aaltonen, because he's played well with the Marlies and acclimated himself to North American hockey. So I think that's the direction. Third line center is the quandary, because the popular thought was potentially a Joe Thornton, but because he'd be UFA and he's been injured for all year, so they might be able to get him relatively cheap, and there'd be the possibility of him reuniting with Patrick Marleau. I'm less enthusiastic about that now simply because he was out for half a year. He had major knee surgery on one knee last year and now the other knee this year. So
Sure.
it may be coming to the end. Plus, it sounds like he's willing to take a lesser money to stay in San Jose. So I think it's going to probably be a trade, but it can't be for somebody who is making a ton of money because they have a ton of cap space for a year, but then going forward, they don't have as much with the contract signings of Marner, Matthews, and Nylander. So, and there is a possibility if they don't see something in the market that they like, that they will move Nylander to the middle, but they won't do that until after they got Nylander signed to the contract. So,
well, look, you have options.
Yeah.
On Thornton, you wonder how much he has left in the tank. To me, he feels more like a deadline pickup. Somebody just a little bit of sprinkle on top to chip in terms of a full season. I don't know. Our next question at Jillian McLeod 05. What player options and or package from the current Leafs Marlies would you offer for a top 2 D-man?
Well, it would depend on who the top 2 D-man is. The popular name has been Noah Hanifin. And I mean, I postured on I think a previous convo that a deal like their first round pick, which is 25th overall, Kasperi Kapanen, and probably Garrett Sparks would get Hanifin from Carolina. Now there are rumors that Vancouver is very interested in Hanifin, and Carolina wants Carolina wants the number 7 overall pick and something. If they want the number 7 overall pick and something really good from Vancouver, then the package that I indicated probably is not enough. And I think Carolina is pricing themselves out of the market. But I think it's going to take basically their first and a young forward, either Kapanen, maybe Connor Brown, which I wouldn't really like them to trade because I think he's a good player.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to have to give up something to get something. And if it's a team that needs the goaltender, I think Garrett Sparks is going to be a guy that they use as a piece in a deal.
Mm-hmm. Hey, one of Gus Katsaros' favorite Leafs is Connor Brown, along with Zach Hyman, because those two guys are serious puck retrievers. And if you're part of the analytics crew and you want to make sure you have the puck and possession's a big thing for you, those are your guys. The next question comes from Gary McAllister at GM McAllister 15. Think the Leafs would have any interest in Flames prospect Rasmus Andersson? Possible trade, and what would you think it would cost the Leafs? Goat or Levo to get it done?
Yeah, I'm not sure that the Leafs would be interested in Anderson. So, it's funny because the Flames have come up as a potential team that the Leafs would trade with, and if you look at what the Leafs have to offer and what the Flames' needs are, they sort of match. The Flames don't have a first round pick because they traded in the Travis Hamonic deal. The Flames are loaded on defense, not only at the NHL level, but they have Adam Fox and they have Villamaki and Oliver Shillington, who was a highly ranked prospect, but is sort of a little lesser now. And in that instance, they might be open to a deal like the one I just mentioned. Obviously, the target would be somebody like Dougie Hamilton. Mm-hmm. And I think it would probably cost a first and a Kapanen at least, but I think that's more of a possibility than the Leafs trading for an unknown commodity like Anderson. They really, I think at this point, the Leafs organization has too many 5, 6, 7 options on defense. They need 2s, 3s, 4s, or 1s, and I don't see them trading to other organizations for a guy who is a borderline Marley / Leaf.
Yeah, the time to go get those pieces is now, and if not now, it will be very soon, right, Mike? I mean, how many more seasons like the past 2 do the Leafs need to have before the organization is confronted with the reality that it is time to contend, right? So we're in that situation. Last one from Corey at Skate Lace Bite. Love that name. Where do you see Carl Grundstrom fitting into the Leafs lineup next season?
Well, Grundstrom has come to play with the Marlies the last 2 playoffs. Last year, he scored 3 goals in 6 playoff games as a 19-year-old. And this year, he's been very effective on their top line. I think he's going to get a long look at training camp. He has an outside chance of making the Leafs out of training camp based on what they do in the offseason and how many spots are open on the wing, how many players get moved out in deals. But more than likely, if you look at what they've done with Janssen, what they've done with Kapanen, what they've done with Nylander, they've kept them down with the Marlies for at least a year, let them sort of acclimate to the North American game, let them get some professional experience, let them know what the Leafs expect of him as a two-way player, and then they call him up. So I think he probably ends up with the Marlies for most of the year, but I could see him playing some games with the Leafs.
So
they really like him.
That's Mike's mailbag. Hey, Mike, I just got a call from Kramer. He needs your mailbag as collateral at the LaGuardia airport. He's gambling again. Anybody who watches Seinfeld will get that. And if you don't watch Seinfeld, come on, it's the greatest sitcom ever. Hashtag Ask Mike on Twitter, at the Leafs Convo, at Mike in Buffalo, at I Am Sports Heart for your questions going forward. We're going to have this segment potentially every podcast going forward, potentially every second podcast. We're also going to mix in some forgotten Leafs. Mike, before we let you go, I just want to do some bullet points on the things we talked about. So first off, the Marlies Stars, Game 4 of the Calder Cup final. Toronto's up 2-1 in the series. Does it get back to Rico?
I think it does. And one question mark that I haven't seen an update on from guys like Paul Hendrick and Lance Hornby, who were down in Texas, was that Frederic Gauthier left the game in the second period in Game 3, and I don't believe came back. His status is questionable based on that for Game 4, and if he's out, then they'll be probably shifting around some things on their roster. So we'll have to keep an eye out.
So the Marlies are up 2-1 if they win Games 4 and 5 down in Tejas. It is certainly over, and the organization will win its first Calder Cup. I think they're going to win it. It's just a matter of which location, Texas or Toronto. Come the start of the next NHL season, will DJ Smith be on the bench for the Maple Leafs?
No. I think he's going to get the Islander job, but it's not etched in stone. If, as somebody I talked to earlier this morning said, if he was definitely the choice, he'd be named already, unless Lou wanted to wait a few days to let the dust settle. But I have a feeling he wants to get a chance to talk to coaches out there who may not be free right now, like Barry Trotz.
Just an interesting, well, maybe not interesting, but a side note to that. DJ Smith's wife works in Toronto now, and I worked with her for over a decade, and DJ Smith and his wife Christy are two of the nicest people you'll ever meet in your life. Salt of the earth, just good down home people with tons of skill. And I wish DJ Smith and Christy nothing but the best and success going forward. They've done really well to this point, and I think bigger and better days are ahead for them, whether they're in Toronto or on the island. Remains to be seen. And the Auston Matthews, Judd Moldaver thing with the Orr Hockey Group, is this much ado about nothing? Do you think at some point, things will get ironed out, or should we be keeping our eye on a potential showdown at some point?
I don't know about a showdown, but I don't blame people for being unsettled when, remember, there was a lack of feeling settled before he signed his entry level deal, because there was talk about, Lou Lamoriello, being a little chintzy with the bonus structure. And until he's locked up, until he's safely away for 8 years, I understand fans being a little, queasy, but I don't foresee any problems. For everything I've seen, Auston Matthews loves it in Toronto and wants to win a cup for the Leafs. So I think that's where it's going.
I don't know if we should compare him to Connor McDavid. Actually, I know we should never compare him to Connor McDavid. Auston Matthews he might be the Jean Beliveau of our time. I don't know how you want to put it, but he's not Connor Crosby. And I don't want to disparage the kid, but is he at that level, Mike? Last point, we got to go.
I think he's just slightly below, but when you score 40 goals as a rookie and then you average over 40 goals in your second year, he's a phenomenal talent. He's a franchise player. I think he deserves to make more than Eichel, more than Taves or Kane. Remember, it's based on percentage. Sure. So he's going to make $11 to $12 million.
Okay, and he is a 1A, but
yes,
Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, your buddy, and Connor McDavid are who they are for a reason, right? Marcel Dion was not Wayne Gretzky. These guys are amazing, but let's
keep it in
perspective. Yeah. Mike, we got to go. Congratulations on Mike's mailbag. You got through it successfully. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Norman.
So it's hashtag Ask Mike, hashtag Mike's Mailbag. Use one of the two, plus add us on Twitter with your questions for Mike. Our Twitter handles again, at I Am Sports Heart, at Mike in Buffalo, at the Leafs Convo. Let's get this done. Mike's Mailbag, terrific segment. So many questions for him. We'll get to all of your answers in time. Believe me. Upcoming guests on the show, McKean's Roto World hockey analyst, Gus Katsaros, author and radio TV personality, Jim Lang, Clarkson Cup champ from the Markham Thunder, super goalie, Erica Howe, and hockey historian who's now working for the Sudbury Wolves, Mike Comito. Can't wait for those podcasts. I know you can't wait either. Once again, thank you for all of your support. For Mike Augello, I'm Norman James. This has been the Leafs Convo. We out.